Hello, welcome to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein. I have a wonderfully interesting guest today. He is Dr. Andrew Zwicker, who is at the same time not only a scientist, but he is also a state senator-elect for New Jersey, for Princeton, right, Andrew? And
part of 14 different towns, including
yes.
Princeton. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. State Senator-elect. And by the way, in January, he will be officially the state senator. And welcome, Andrew Zwicker.
Thank you, Joan.
We have so much to talk about today. First of all, you have interests that are not only scientific and very interesting, but you also have interests in the political system. You are, of course, with the Plaza Physics Lab. And so let's talk about some of these things that you think need your attention, need for us to focus on. Should we start perhaps with elections and access to voting?
Sure. And thanks for having me, Joan. Really looking forward to this conversation. So as you mentioned, I am in my day job, quote unquote, at the Plasma Physics Laboratory, where I've been almost continuously since I finished my graduate work. And that laboratory is part of the Department of Energy's National Laboratory System. And the Plasma Physics Laboratory's mission, primary mission, is the development of fusion energy, which is clean and safe and carbon-free and will change the world. And so as I entered into the political sphere and dipped my toe into it and eventually became an elected official, people assumed, and correctly, that the climate crisis was one of the key things that was important to me as a scientist and as now a legislator to try to address at the state level. And that is one of the key things that I work on. But the first bill that I introduced, and quite honestly, the reason in many ways that I even got involved and decided to take a risk and run for office, was because what I had seen back in 2014, 2015, when I was making these decisions about the fact that people were disillusioned with elections even back then. They were feeling that their vote didn't matter, that their voice wasn't being listened to. And so the very first bill that I introduced was not a climate bill, though I have introduced many of those. But the first bill I ever introduced was a bill that I call the New Voter Empowerment Act. And that's a bill to allow 17-year-olds to vote in a primary election. And normally you have to be 18 to vote, right, in the United States. But this would allow 17-year-olds in New Jersey to vote in a primary election as long as they are 18 by the time the November general election comes around. And the idea there is a couple things. One, young people are the most invested right now. And whether we're talking about climate or anything else, they are the future. And two, often once someone becomes a voter, they stay a voter. And so if I can get engaged a younger group that cares so passionately about climate and many other topics, that's what I would try to do. So that's the first bill that I ever wrote. It's also the first bill that I ever had vetoed, in this case by previous Governor Chris Christie, who said it was potentially unconstitutional. And we had done the research. It's completely constitutional. So I'm working, it's still now working to get it back through the legislature and onto Governor Murphy's desk. Maybe even before the end of this calendar year, we're trying to get that done. And if not, then early next calendar year. But that is sort of the root, Joan, of some of my motivation for running and some of my initial focus. But since then, I've done many more around early voting by machines, which we just started here in New Jersey. In 2020, we had an all vote by mail election because of the COVID pandemic, and I wrote both of those pieces of legislation. I've written legislation to try to shine a light on dark money in politics, to stop gerrymandering, and many others. So I have a whole package of bills that I've focused on. Is really one of the key things, because before we talk about anything else, I think we have to talk about just the foundation of our democracy. If that's not secure, it's hard to talk about job creation or climate change or economic development or social justice or anything else without the foundation of democracy.
That is such an important point, isn't it? Because it's our democracy that's given us the sense of pride that we have, and that we can make our world, we can make our country a place of equality and help to everyone. And we've been feeling that it's been wearing down. And we need the support. We need that. And you're thinking of wonderful legislative ways to give us that support. And that's why I really wanted you to come on my show, because you have so much to share, Andrew Zwicker. So go on, tell us more.
Sure. So I think often of my father-in-law, who he died a few years ago, but he was a lifelong Republican, a classic Eisenhower Republican, you might call him, right? A small business owner who believed in small and efficient government, but was socially moderate and somewhat fiscally conservative. And in about 2008, he was already talking about how his values as a Republican had stayed the same, but the Republican Party had shifted more and more to the right. And this is during the Obama years. And he was very distressed by that then. And what we're seeing today in 2021 is, unfortunately, in other state legislatures, not New Jersey, and federally in Washington, D.C., a systemic attack on just the foundation of voting and democracy. And I don't care personally whether you vote Democratic or Republican or unaffiliated. I care whether or not you vote. That to me is the single most important issue. When I won my election in 2015 to represent the 16th legislative district, which is 14 towns across 4 counties, of which Princeton is one of the towns, I won that election by less than 100 votes. And 34,000 people had come out. I won by 78 votes. That to me, it couldn't be any more clear indication that every vote matters. And that I ran on this idea of being a scientist legislator, of using data and evidence to make decisions, not just decisions around science and technology, but around any particular public policy. Even back then, people were starting to question, did their vote matter? And to me, we just did an election for the governor and for the entire legislature. About 1/3 of the registered voters came out, between 33 and 40%, let's say. But that means 60% plus didn't think it was worth their time or effort to vote. And that to me is a real concern. When you add to that, what you see is an undermining of elections in other states. And unfortunately, it is an undermining that has become very partisan. I am deeply concerned about where our country is going. And so I feel an obligation as an elected official to fight and make New Jersey a model for fair and free and open elections. And again, not whether or not someone's going to vote Democratic, it's whether they're going to, or Republican, right? It's just that they are going to vote and feel that their vote matters.
Yes, I experienced that because I always vote. And this time around, I had to do it by mail. And what worried me is that, was it going to be counted? If I put it in the mailbox, would the mailman get it to, to the voting place? And there was worries that I never had before when I went to vote. Normally, I would go in person to a local school. And one of the good parts about it was that one of the young people working there was a former student of mine from Mercer County Community College. So whenever I showed up, he would always come up and greet me. We would talk, we would catch up a little. It was all a very pleasant experience. Suddenly, I can't do that. You see, I can't drive over there. I had to vote by mail. I had so many worries that my vote counted. And that should not happen. We should not feel that our vote is not going to count, because then we've lost faith in voting. We've lost faith in, as you say, in democracy.
Yeah, Joan, I completely agree. One quick public service announcement. If you or others are concerned about the postal system delivering a ballot in time, we've now put drop boxes, secure
Yes.
drop boxes around the state. You can always
Right.
drop your ballot there, and it's picked up every evening. And now we've created web pages so you can check to make sure your ballot has been received and counted. We have more work to do, but New Jersey is becoming a role model for how to vote and how to make sure our elections are safe and secure. So now, for the first time, not only can you vote by mail, not only can you vote on election day, but for the 10 days before election day, the first Tuesday in November, you could go and vote by machine early. And other states have done this. And I was proud to be the author of this legislation to allow early voting by machine, because for some people, the first Tuesday in November isn't always the easiest to get to. They're taking care of children. They have a job that doesn't allow them a lot of time off. The weather may not be particularly good. And so 2 weekends before and the 5 work days in between those 2 weekends, you could also just go by machine. So we're going to continue to do everything we can to make voting easy and to make it safe, and to make sure that the doubts that you're expressing, we can start to go back forward, if you will, and have you and others go, no, I know my vote counted. I know my vote matters.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What about some of the other topics like climate crisis?
Sure. So, I represent, as I mentioned, 14 towns, including Manville, New Jersey, which was in the news for all the wrong reasons during Ida. That was a devastating storm just from a few months ago. Right. Manville is in a flood zone that when the river that goes right through town goes over its banks, which happens more and more with all these extreme storms, causes devastation. Fortunately, no one in Manville perished, but in Hillsborough, the town right next door, there were people who died, along with loss of property and billions of dollars in loss. So it's the climate crisis leads to increases in severe storms. Storms of the century now are happening more and more often. And it's not just on the coast in the beautiful, beautiful New Jersey shore, which we all love, but it's happening inland as well, as we see severe rainfall, heavy winds, storm after storm, along with a warming climate, which is changing the patterns, and then heat waves, which then, especially in our cities, is causing significant increases in the average temperatures in our cities, which leads to other health issues and has an impact on our most vulnerable communities. You put all of that together, and we are absolutely at a tipping point for this entire planet. And so this is a global problem. This is something that the entire world has to work on, and is just a short time from when we're filming this right now, there was an international conference trying to get countries to all agree on reducing fossil fuel consumption and attacking this globally. The United States was a leader when it came to the climate crisis, and unfortunately, the previous president had much different perspective on what to do or not to do and where energy should come from. And so the United States lost its place as a leader. And then within the and President Biden is working hard to reestablish the United States as a global leader. But then within that becomes, what can each individual state do? What can each individual town do? And so as a state legislator, of course, I'm looking at things such as ensuring that while the Paris Climate Accord, which is for countries, is something that's supposed to guide where we will be as a planet, New Jersey is doing its part to reduce its consumption of fossil fuels, to ensure that our most vulnerable communities are not going to be impacted greater than the rest of the state, which is what is happening, is that the climate crisis typically has the biggest impact on communities of color and communities, those that are the most vulnerable. So for instance, yesterday, I'm the chair of the science committee in the New Jersey General Assembly, And yesterday we had a very spirited debate about what is called the Energy Master Plan for New Jersey, which is to set very aggressive goals when it comes to electric cars and electric transportation and electrifying heat and air conditioning and doing everything New Jersey can to become a national leader when it comes to the climate crisis. And the last thing I'll say about that is under Governor Phil Murphy's leadership, New Jersey has become quickly the leader when it comes to offshore wind. And we are rapidly starting to build up and create an offshore wind electrical infrastructure. It's a few years away before we see that actually coming to fruition, but that's going to be a key piece, is 10, 15 miles off the Jersey Shore coast, putting wind turbines that will produce many, many, many megawatts of power capable of powering a significant portion of our homes. And so it's a complicated problem, but New Jersey has been a real leader, and I've been proud to be a part of pushing that through legislatively.
Yes, Governor Murphy has been amazing in so many ways. Yeah, we're lucky. We lucky have you. We're lucky we have Governor Murphy. Thanks for caring. Thanks for caring and knowing what to do. Both of those things come in place. What about, what did I see here? Oh, technology to create jobs. You told me about that. What was that about?
So my science committee is also tasked with how can technology, how can the amazing research that's happening at our universities, which might be the next cure for cancer. It might be some next generation cell phone. It might be some tool to make our lives a little bit better. But how can we make sure that when those inventions, those creations, that technology is being developed, that it gets developed here in New Jersey? Because when that happens, then a small company is started. And maybe that small company is successful and it starts hiring more and more people and becomes wildly successful. And so technology has always traditionally been an economic driver. And the goal here is to do what Governor Murphy has said often, is that New Jersey was Silicon Valley before there even was a Silicon Valley. The transistor was invented in New Jersey, the laser, so many different things, the telephone, the phonograph, right, was invented here in New Jersey. And we want to make sure that these inventions lead to job creation. That's the general idea about it. We still are considered the medicine chest of the world because of the pharmaceutical industry that's here in New Jersey. So the question from my perspective is, given the incredible talent that's already in our universities, what public policies do I need to help put in place to try to ensure that that transfer of knowledge into the private sector can occur easily, that the education is there so that we can make hires from New Jersey students, that we can grow these businesses. This happens in both my science committee in the Assembly and under what's called the New Jersey Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology and the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, all working together. And there's other organizations as well.
And you're
But this has
involved
been a
with
real
all of
focus.
them? You're involved with all of them?
Not all of them. Many of them. I am a member of the commission. I actually helped to revitalize it. I'm a member of that commission. I'm the chair of the science committee. I mean, my background obviously lends itself to this. But no, my job is not to be involved in all of them. My job is to help spur them on, to make sure they have the tools that they need, the financial tools they need, or the public policy rules and regulations they need to thrive and succeed, and then to get out of the way. I may help create them, but after that, I'll get out of the way and let them do their thing, which is what they're doing.
That's wonderful. So you've already done so much. You've already, moved us ahead and thought of changes and tried to make the changes happen. And the way you show an understanding of letting people get the job done, you see, you're not a dictator. You're not going to try and control them. You want them to go ahead and do what they need to do. And that's what the leadership is about. That's why we need good leaders. Not people who have big egos and want to be seen everywhere. No, we want people who want to make things move, make people do what they already have the desire to do, provided that it's going to be helpful.
Of course, of course. And I think that's, Joan, I think that's, the role of government often is to get
Right.
things going and then move out of the way so that the private
Yeah.
sector can take over. And there's debates on always, what is the role of government? What's the size of government? How much is too much or too little? Those are policy debates that should happen and need to happen. But in the end, it is doing what we can to do, as you said, do good for the people of New Jersey.
Yeah. And I hope the people of New Jersey understand that and get rolling. Anything?
They are. They are.
They are? How do you know that?
I see it happening around me all the time.
Really?
I see businesses being created left and right, not just in my district, but around the state. I see amazing students who are graduating and staying in New Jersey, getting jobs in New Jersey, and really good jobs. And these are students at all educational levels. I see New Jersey becoming this leader and creating jobs when it comes to offshore wind or solar energy or electric transportation infrastructure. And I see people getting enthused to come out and vote. That's a slower one. But, if anything, with some of the distressing things we talked about earlier, it has been a reinvigoration of people to want to get involved. Can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have said to me, maybe I was at a protest in the 1960s or the 1970s, and then I didn't do much. And I'm all in on trying to get whatever it might be done, work for peace, work for protecting our climate and our air and our water, work for social justice, work for racial equality. People are, I'm an optimist, right? This is a difficult time right now. I feel to be optimistic. COVID is still among us. The polarization of our political parties in Washington is as bad now as it's ever been, perhaps. It can be, easy to become pessimistic. I am optimistic, concerned, certainly, cautiously optimistic, but optimistic nonetheless, because I see this movement, because young people, and you're a teacher, this, because young people who have everything to lose are getting engaged in ways that we just haven't seen for quite some time. That gives me a lot of hope and optimism.
Yes, yes. When I teach college sociology, what I'm trying to do these days is have students understand this is the world we live in. And this is why we may feel confused, or we may feel questioning, where am I? What should I do? And that's why, in order to, the key word is to understand. Yeah. If they understand this is what's happening, this is why these changes are going on, maybe we know how to approach, we know what to do, you see, but otherwise they get confused and then they want to hide, they want to run away. And one of the things I like to do with my students is get them interested in wanting to solve problems, you see, because of our most famous scientists, whether we're talking about Einstein or whoever, what were they? They were people who understood the complexity of science, but also the desire for human societies. That was the beautiful thing about scientists. I guess you belong with the Einstein group then, don't you?
You could never, ever put Zwicker and Einstein in the same sentence. That would be absolutely no. No. Thank you, but no. But Joan, you get to actually, I think, something really, really important, which is about, it's not just problem solving, right? It's about critical thinking. It's about being able to look and absorb information and filter it and decide for yourself, not because I told you, but because, you, whether you personally or as a young person, can filter through all of this. So, we're going through this huge debate on vaccines right now when it comes to COVID. And there's so much misinformation out there. And I ask young people all the time, where do you get your information from? And how do you know if it's on your social media feed? How do you even know whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing. You know, even before COVID, scientists are not known as great communicators. It takes a lot of work to do science communication. And we're fortunate that there is a whole group of outstanding science communicators who work hard for, whether it's in writing or video, radio, podcasting, whatever it might be. But, you know, hey, does red wine cause cancer, not cause cancer, make you live longer, good for your heart? You know, there's reports coming out all the time on something as simple as having a glass of wine. And people are never, you know, there's sometimes they're not quite sure. Well, is red wine good for me? The answer, of course, is yes, always in moderation, but it is. So now you get to something like COVID, which, if you make the wrong decision, can be fatal. And this is really about where we now have perhaps too much information and no way to be able to easily filter out the quality of that information. And that leads, in my opinion, to people not sure even to how to begin to make these critical decisions because they're inundated. And that gets to what we see right now, the fact that we're doing this on Zoom, for instance, that, you know, we're losing this ability to make critical thoughts. I have, and this really pains me, but I have a dear close friend who I've known for decades. And he's gone down this rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and, you know, the government's going to put microchips into vaccines. And I can't, nobody can take him out of this. And, you know, I feel like I've lost a friend, but I also worry about, it's not just him, it's many, many others. And what do we do about journalism? What do we do about local journalism, which is disappearing? What do we do about this inundation of information? I mean, this is as fundamental, and we're talking about democracy, right? This debate, this pretend debate on whether the 2020 presidential election was stolen. It's nonsense, but there's a significant number of people who think that's the case.
Yeah.
How do we get
So
to democracy in this case?
So instead of people being more informed, they're more confused.
Yeah.
And this is part of our problem. Well, Andrew Zwicker, State Senator Andrew Zwicker, Dr. Professor Andrew Zwicker, scientist, I am so happy to have had you on my show today. Thank you so much. We should bring you back because there's always so much more to say, isn't there?
It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Happy to come back anytime. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Andrew. See you. Thank
Bye.
you for coming to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. Goodbye.